Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Hami and these are the headlines. Prayers have resumed in Turkey's iconic Hagia Sophia after a period of 86 years. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan attended the restoration ceremony and prayers. Earlier this month, Ankara turned back the former Byzantine-era cathedral into a mosque to signify and celebrate its Ottoman roots. China has told the US to close its consulate in Chengdu City in the country's southwestern Sichuan province. China's foreign ministry says the move is a countermeasure to the US demand to close Beijing's consulate general in Houston. Meanwhile, the US has called for the creation of a new alliance of democracies to counter what it calls China's aggressive policies. In Brazil, 1,311 more people have died from COVID-19, increasing the tally to over 84,000. The US has reported 1,225 deaths and over 76,000 cases in the last 24 hours. The total number of infections in the country has surpassed 4 million with over 144,000 deaths. Meanwhile, Pakistan's death toll from the virus has crossed 5,700 with 54 fatalities in the last 24 hours. After 1,209 people tested positive overnight, the tally of infections has crossed 270,000. Worldwide, the death count has exceeded 632,000, while cases top 15.4 million. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Yevgeny Yanin says illegal interference led to the Ukrainian Airlines plane crash in Iran. Yanin said Kiev was expecting an Iranian delegation to visit Ukraine next week for talks. Earlier, Canada shared black box transcripts of planes shot down by Tehran on January 8, killing all 176 people on board. In football, holders Juventus have lost by 2-1 to Udinese at the Friuli Stadium as they missed a chance to clinch a 9th straight Italian league title. The Old Lady have won only one of their past 5 games but just need one win from their 3 remaining games to secure the title. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now for the news in detail. In Turkey, Istanbul's iconic Hagia Sophia hosted Islamic prayer services for the first time in 86 years. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan, along with other top officials, attended the prayers at the mosque. More in this report. Hagia Sophia was built as an Orthodox Christian cathedral and first converted into a mosque after the Ottoman conquest 9 centuries later. It became a museum in 1934 under the rule of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. But last month, Turkey's top court ruled the 1934 cabinet decision of converting Hagia Sophia into a museum was illegal. Subsequently, the landmark was reconverted into a mosque. An imam began the formal prayer service after Erdogan recited verses from the Holy Quran. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Leaders and dignitaries from other countries such as Azerbaijan and Qatar attended the opening ceremony. A limited number of worshippers were allowed into the building to ensure social distancing amid the COVID-19 outbreak. Millions of Muslims around the world watched the ceremony's live telecast as they were excited to see the iconic mosque hosting prayers once again. Well, China has told the U.S. to close its consulate in Chengdu City and the country's southwestern Sichuan province. China's foreign ministry says the move is a countermeasure to the U.S. demand to close Beijing's consulate general in Houston. The ministry said it has informed the U.S. embassy of the decision to withdraw its operations in Chengdu. It said Washington's move was a serious breach of the terms of the China-U.S. Consular Convention and international law. The ties between the two countries have worsened this year over a range of issues, including the coronavirus, South China Sea, Hong Kong, and trade. Earlier, Beijing threatened to retaliate if Washington did not reconsider the orders to close China's consulate in Houston. Beijing has slammed U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's remarks calling for the formation of a global anti-China alliance. In a media briefing, Foreign Ministry's spokesman Wang Wenbin said Pompeo's comments show a disregard for reality and reeks of ideological bias. Wang said China has urged the U.S. to discard the Cold War mentality. This comes after Pompeo urged the creation of a new alliance of democracies to counter what he called China's aggressive policies. Speaking in California, Pompeo said the U.S. and allies should use more creative and assertive ways to press China to change its methods. He said the combined economic, military, and diplomatic power of the UN, NATO, the G7, and G20 is enough to counter Beijing's threat. In Brazil, 1,311 more people have died from COVID-19, increasing the tally to over 84,000. The U.S. has reported 1,225 deaths, over 76,000 cases in the last 24 hours. The total number of infections in the country has surpassed 4 million, with over 144,000 deaths. Worldwide, the death count has exceeded 632,000, while cases top 15.4 million. The virus is making a dangerously aggressive comeback in Iran, where 2,621 people tested positive overnight. The death toll in the country has crossed 15,000. In Australia's state of Victoria, the outbreak is not abating as it reported another record high of new daily cases and 5 deaths. The surge in infections in South Africa has forced the government to shut schools for 4 weeks. Meanwhile, Uganda has recorded its first death from the novel coronavirus. In Asia, China reported 21 new coronavirus cases on the mainland, with most being locally transmitted. Cluster infections continue to worry South Korea as more than 50 cases emerged in the past 24 hours. India has reported a record spike in COVID-19 cases, with 49,310 people testing positive in the past 24 hours. The Health Ministry said the countrywide death toll has risen by 740 to over 30,000. The ministry said the number of total infections is nearing 1.3 million, while active cases are over 440,000. It said over 817,000 people have recovered so far. Indian Council of Medical Research says it has so far conducted 15.4 million tests in the country of over 1 billion people. Pakistan has reported 54 deaths from the coronavirus in the past 24 hours, raising the total to 5,763. The Health Ministry says 1,209 new cases were reported overnight as the tally crossed 270,000. Officials said over 219,000 people have recovered from the virus so far. The ministry said there are now over 50,000 active cases in the country. Sindh is the worst hit province with over 115,000 infections, while Punjab has reported over 91,000 cases. In the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province, the tally of infected is nearly 33,000, while there are over 11,000 cases in Balochistan. Capital city Islamabad has reported close to 15,000 cases, while Azad Jammu and Kashmir and Gilgit-Baltistan have around 3,900 cases. Afghanistan's acting foreign minister Hanif Atmar says Kabul will never allow its territory to be used to hurt any other country, including Pakistan. Addressing an event via video link, Atmar said terror groups also pose a threat to Pakistan, and the fallout from terrorism has affected all countries in the region. He said the Taliban should seek power through ballots and not bullets. The acting Afghan foreign minister has also proposed a referendum in the country to decide its future. Atmar said that the outcome of the inter-Afghan dialogue process will be submitted to the UN Security Council. Iran says it will take political and legal measures after an investigation is concluded into an incident involving a Mahan airplane in Syria. This comes after 2 U.S. fighter jets came close to an Iranian passenger plane, causing the pilot to change altitude quickly to avoid a collision. Foreign Ministry spokesman Abbas Musavi said the investigation is underway to get into the details of the incident. He said Iran's UN envoy has told the Secretary General the U.S. will bear responsibility if any happens to the plane on its way back. Officials say a number of passengers were injured after the pilot abruptly lowered altitude. Washington has long accused Mahan Air of ferrying weapons of Iranian-linked fighters in Syria and elsewhere. Ukraine's Deputy Foreign Minister Yevgeny Yanin says illegal interference led to the Ukrainian Airlines plane crash in Iran. Earlier, Canada shared black box transcripts of the plane shot down by Tehran on January the 8th. Yanin thanked all the partners in deciphering the data from the black boxes. He said Kiev was expecting an Iranian delegation to visit Ukraine next week for talks. Iranian forces say they downed the Boeing 737 jet after mistaking it for a missile at a time of high tensions with the United States. The crash claimed the lives of all 176 people on board, mostly Canadians. Turkey has slammed France for demanding European Union sanctions on Ankara over the Greek conflict. Foreign Ministry spokesman Hami Aksoy said Turkey cannot be threatened through sanctions. Aksoy said the statements of France's President Emmanuel Macron have no value for the country. He said France has lost its neutrality and chance to contribute to stability in the Eastern Mediterranean. Aksoy said Paris has not been able to get any results from its policies and will also fail in the future. The comments came after Macron demanded EU sanctions against Turkey, claiming violations of Greek and Cypriot waters. The UN Security Council has approved a request by the Libyan government of national accord to hold a session of the Sanctions Committee. Libya's envoy to the UN, Tahir al-Soni, said the session will be held at the end of July over the violations of the arms embargo. The request comes as part of GNA efforts to uncover countries that have provided support to the militias. The Security Council imposed an open-ended embargo in Libya in 2011 to stop supplies of arms and military equipment to and from the country. Libya is involved in a bloody conflict between forces led by Commander Khalifa Haftar and the UN-backed government headed by Fayez al-Sarraj. The US and the UK have accused Russia of testing a weapon-like projectile in space which can be used to target satellites in orbit. The US State Department described the recent use of what will appear to be actual in-orbit anti-satellite weaponry as concerning. UK Space Directorate has expressed concern over the tests and said the Russian satellite had the characteristics of a weapon. Russia's defense ministry said it was using new technology to perform checks on its space equipment. Russia, the UK, the US and China are party to a space treaty that requires that outer space is to be explored by all and purely for peaceful purposes. The treaty adds that weapons should not be placed in orbit or in space. In Israel, protests against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu have turned violent as security forces fired tear gas and water cannon to disperse the protesters. The demonstrations erupted overnight in Jerusalem for a third time in a week against government's handling of COVID-19 pandemic. Police made several arrests and assaulted the protesters outside the Prime Minister's residence. Protesters blocked roads and set tires on fire in the city center. The demonstrators also asked Netanyahu to resign amid a corruption trial in which he faces charges of bribery, breach of trust and fraud. Netanyahu has denied any wrongdoing while being in the office. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The US says non-proliferation cooperation between Moscow and Washington will reinforce global security and stability. Talking to media, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said both nations face big strategic challenges concerning arms control. Pompeo said Washington and Moscow are set to begin strategic dialogue to discuss the next generation of arms control agreements. He said both the countries share the common interest of making the world a safer place. The secretary said China has declined Washington's invitation to participate in the negotiations. Pompeo said Washington remains hopeful that Beijing will reconsider. The U.S. has begun talks with Japan about deploying mobile American Marine units in Okinawa. In an interview, U.S. Marine Corps Commandant General David Berger said armed units will work closely with Japanese forces. The commandant said the deployment will prevent any potential adversary from taking the next move. Earlier in March, Berger published a Foreign Design 2030 plan to trim aircraft numbers, dump most cannon artillery, and cut heavy armor. This comes as Washington has accused Beijing of using the coronavirus pandemic to further territorial claims in the South China Sea. Beijing insists its intentions in the region are peaceful and has accused Washington of trying to drive a wedge between countries in Asia. The U.S. has approved a $634 million arms deal to upgrade Chile's F-16 Fighting Falcon combat jets. In a press release, the Defense Security Cooperation Agency said the State Department approved the proposed sale to Santiago. The agency said the move furthers U.S. foreign policy and national security objectives in South America. It said Lockheed Martin will be the principal contractor and the proposed sale will not alter the regional military balance. Santiago had requested to buy modernization equipment and services, including software upgrades and combined altitude radar altimeters. U.S. President Donald Trump and Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman have reaffirmed the strong defense partnership between the two countries. In a statement, White House said Trump and Salman also discussed critical regional and bilateral issues during a phone call. The statement said the two leaders discussed the positive developments in defeating COVID-19 and re-energizing global economies. He said Trump also expressed his well wishes to Saudi Arabia's King Salman bin Abdulaziz, who underwent a successful surgery. U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden and Barack Obama have slammed President Donald Trump's handling of the pandemic. In a video message, Biden said it cannot be imagined to say irresponsible words while holding the presidential office. The presidential candidate said he does not understand Trump's inability to get a sense of people's circumstances. Obama said it is hard to fathom anybody wanting to take away people's health care in the midst of a pandemic. Biden has started his campaign by using video messages to engage voters in order to excel in the digital presidential race. In South Sudan, thousands of families have fled their homes in the troubled Jonglei region due to an outbreak of violence following months of peace. The United Nations mission in South Sudan says armed groups attacked the village of Likogole. The UN said some 6,000 people have sought sanctuary next to a UN base in Pibor town. Its tensions remain high in Pibor, with the prospect of many more families seeking protection. The mission called on parties to immediately stop fighting, pull back and return to their home areas. The UN said external actors need to stop deliberately stoking the conflict for the sake of the local communities. Mediation efforts by 5 West African presidents in Mali have ended without a deal over country's deepening political crisis. Presidents of Ghana, Ivory Coast, Niger, Nigeria and Senegal held talks all day to break the political deadlock in Mali. Tens of thousands of people have poured onto the streets of Bamako to demand President Ibrahim Keita's resignation. The protests turned violent earlier this month when clashes between security forces and the protesters left 11 people dead. Niger's President Mahamadou Issoufou said the West African Regional Bloc, ECOWAS, will have a virtual meeting on Monday to discuss the crisis further.
In all these meetings, the objective is to find a compromise which will allow Mali to get out of this crisis quickly. I am optimistic. I hope that a solution will be found, but we have decided to report back to all the heads of states of the ECOWAS during an extraordinary summit that will be held 7th.
Lows and the highs of the business world now. BRICS countries have adopted a joint statement supporting multilateral trade system in their 10th trade ministers meeting. The countries agreed to strengthen cooperation in areas including e-commerce, intellectual property rights, as well as small and medium-sized enterprises. The ministers said they will oppose unilateralism and protectionism, while all along supporting necessary reform of the WTO. They have also agreed to protect the lawful rights and interests of their developing members. The ministers decided to step up collaboration amid the spread of the COVID-19, strengthening supply chains to jointly fight the pandemic.
China will work with all parties to implement the consensus and results of this meeting, further strengthen the coordination and cooperation of the BRICS countries in the economic and trade field, and contribute to the joint fight against the pandemic and the restoration of global trade and investment growth.
European markets have tumbled as a flaring of diplomatic tensions between the world's two largest economies continued to weigh on sentiment. The pan-European stock 600 dropped 2%, with tech stocks diving 4.3% to lead losses as all sectors and major bourses slid into negative territory. London's FTSE has slumped over 1.5%. Paris's CAC 40 has slipped close to almost 2%. Germany's DAX has dived nearly 2%. Stocks in Asia have slumped over worsening friction between China and the US. All bourses were in the negative territory after Beijing told Washington to shut its Chengdu consulate. West Indies have elected to field against England in the third and the final test of the three-match series at Old Trafford. The hosts are 66 for 2 after a shaky start, with Rory Burns and Ben Stokes still on the crease. Dom Sibley departed on a duck courtesy of some late swing by Kemar Roach, and skipper Joe Root was run out on 17. Jofra Archer was included in the team after missing the second test due to breaching the COVID-19 biosecure protocols. England won the second test by 113 runs to level the three-match series. In football, English champions Liverpool beat Chelsea by 5-3 at Anfield to cap an entire league season undefeated at home. Injured Liverpool captain Jordan Henderson lifted the EPL trophy in a close ceremony after the match in front of an empty Kop. Reds raced into a 3-0 lead via goals from Nevi Keita, Trent Alexander-Arnold and Jorginho Wijnaldum before Olivier Giroud pulled one back. Roberto Firmino restored the 3-goal cushion, but the victors rode back through Tammy Abraham and Christian Pulisic. Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain's strike 6 minutes from the time put the result beyond any doubt as the champions moved on to 96 points. Chelsea now need a point against Wolverhampton Wanderers in their fixture to qualify next season's Champions League. Now the weather situation from around the globe. And that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus News.